Welcome back to Omni Mindfulness. And before we get started in today's episode, I'd like for you to ponder on the question, how do you prioritize your mental well-being in your daily life?
Short story about it is that the why of figuring out creatorship, solopreneurship, creator business type stuff is because of the students that I've worked with. And it's very easy to motivate because I've seen so many of them die by overdose or suicide or, fall into human trafficking rings or struggle with homelessness, and in good scenarios, work in jobs that they hate. And I have two brothers who passed away in their 30s as well. And I often wonder, because everything is connected in terms of our emotions and our physical health, if they were pursuing things that they truly intrinsically wanted to do, would that have served them better? And then the third part of that triangle in terms of my why and motivation for me is that
Namaste, beautiful souls. I'm Shilpa, and you're tuned into the Omni Mindfulness Podcast, a sanctuary for spiritual entrepreneurs. As a holistic mindfulness coach and social marketing strategist, I'm here to guide you on a transformative journey. On this show, we explore captivating stories and provide practical tools that deepen your connection with your authentic self. Through the personal and professional narratives of remarkable individuals, we expand our consciousness and ignite the spark of possibility. Each season, I curate content that empowers you to create a holistic lifestyle encompassing spirituality, mindfulness, energy awareness, and mindset. Join me as we engage in conversations with experts in their respective fields and share solo casts from yours truly, all aimed at supporting you and relaxing, revitalizing, resetting your body, mind, and spirit. I'm your host and the visionary behind Omni Mindfulness. So what if just one story had the power to shift the trajectory of your life? What if you could become an instrument in helping others realize their true selves? And what if your soul's higher purpose lies in experiencing the joy of Omni Mindfulness? Remember, it's never too late to rewrite your story. Meet my next guest, Justin Nolan, the vibrant force behind Just Keep Learning podcast and the embodiment of a growth mindset. Known as JustTries, Justin is on a mission to empower youth to own their dreams and embrace lifelong learning. With humility and boundless generosity, Justin shares his wisdom, time, and services, making him the perfect fit for our conversation today on mindfulness and crafting your story as a solopreneur. So tune in and be inspired by Justin's passion for growth and empowerment. Welcome, Justin. Thank you for being here.
thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to tackling any of the topics that you feel really help your audience. It's been good getting to know you.
Yeah, I am excited as I read through a lot of your socials and your story, and you've talked about a variety of human conditions or emotions. I can relate, and I feel like a lot of my audience can relate. And this year's theme has been what I'm calling like the soulful solopreneurship. It's a tough journey, at least from my perspective. And I think you would be great just to share a little bit insights about crafting presence through storytelling. What is your story, and how have you remained mindful in this path of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, and I feel like that's such a huge topic that it's almost like a lifelong thing. As a fellow podcast host, I've started to realize, though, that a lot of the questions we ask are a situation where there could be like a 1 hour answer, there could be a 1 minute answer, or I could just answer for the 40 years of my life and probably for the next 40 years as well. I think one of the things for me that's really helpful is remembering why I do things, what the purpose behind things are. And I appreciate that people trying to be online creators or business owners, there has to be a certain amount of external validation and extrinsic reward, maybe, but definitely data that says that things are working and that you're trending in the right direction. However, if we can, I always like to start with the intrinsic stuff of why do you want to build this? Why are you working on this project? Those kinds of things. And then balancing that with, is there a market for this? Do people want it? Does it actually help them? Who's it serving? And I'll just add one last point to that, that doesn't just mean business, like trying to be a billionaire like Bezos or Musk and build Amazon or Tesla. It also means nonprofits or just pure content creators, YouTube, podcast, artwork, doesn't matter. That's still the same question exists. Is this going to work, or are you going to continue working on it purely for a hobby? For me, when I have those intrinsic pieces done first, then I can go basically build anything else on top of it.
And maybe you could share a little bit about the catalyst behind how you arrived at this journey. And, I'm not even sure. Do you do other things aside from your entrepreneurial engagements?
Yeah, and they're very closely aligned. I feel like in a perfect world, as creator business type people, entrepreneurial venturists, as you put it, we would have the thing that allows us mental space and freedom to create also be something that we make money in a similarly creative way. And what I mean by that is, if you want to be an author of children's books or nonfiction for young adults, or you want to host a really popular blog, maybe the first step is working for the local newspaper. The second step is ghostwriting for other creators online. And then you find the opportunity to build out your own creative business as sort of a third step. For me specifically, I love creating in all three areas of audio, film, and writing. The fun thing is that my day job for the last 20 years has been supporting youth in more creative entrepreneurial ways. And I specifically work with clients that are in mental health institutions because they can't be in their own high schools right now because of a mental health need. And what that looks like specifically is jails, hospitals, crisis units, homelessness and group homes, addictions, a school for teen moms, stuff like that. So I've always worked with youth in those schools, working towards high school, but we've done things like photography, filmmaking, and creative writing. And one of the things that I noticed about 6 years ago, maybe, so like 2016, 2017, 2018 type thing, was that so many of them wanted to create creative businesses themselves. Like they could be really good influencers on Instagram or really successful podcast hosts, filmmakers, photographers, but they really lacked the business savvy to do it. But that's something that you need to build over time anyways. And there are playbooks for that. Where I really found I could be helpful was for youth like that or adults looking to side hustle. I could help with the other piece that they lacked was the growth mindset part of it all. Do you know how to pursue a creative passion in a mentally healthy way?
Hey, sweet souls, thanks for listening. I know you are experiencing the desire to transition, find your purpose, and thrive. Maybe you're pivoting from one point in your life to a new part of your career or personal life. You're hoping to experience freedom, but feeling the drain of time, skills, and resources, along with the doubts of worthiness, capacity, and confidence, especially with the given new evolving technologies. I get it. I hear it all the time too. What I've done is put together a special group, a special process, and a special place for you to hang out, where we overcome those drains and doubts. I love to talk to you more about this if you're serious about making a change. If you're serious about accomplishing that dream. If you're serious about getting off the couch, getting off of whatever is holding you back, and actually getting somewhere with this thing. If you're serious about becoming a person of power, influence, and hope, and experiencing more emotional freedom, time, and better relationships. If you're serious about getting those dreams, I want to invite you to have a conversation about this. Let's see if this program is right for you and take the next step together. You deserve this. You can do this. Check out the link in the show notes below to reach out. Now back to the show. And that's something that is relevant to anyone. I can say for myself that growth mindset, the reminders are so necessary. My entire office, what you don't see is post-it notes everywhere and a camouflage of inspiration, so to speak. And even the most confident person that I probably know, a few social media gurus, I feel like they are often emphasizing that this growth mindset, they may not use those words, but having the confidence is crucial in your success.
Well, it's an interesting topic because some of those people, maybe all of them, it's hard to know. That would be a cool book to do, is like interview 100 of the most popular musicians in the world and talk about confidence or something. Because I haven't spoken with someone like Taylor Swift about this, but I have heard clips from someone like Post Malone who talks about how it's kind of a myth that you're always confident, like that he's always super nervous. I know in the Macklemore documentary, the Avicii one for sure, the Pink one, Lady Gaga, like they are scared every time they're creating. And what we learn to do is continue to push through that fear. And that gets into some of the mindset stuff of like an inverted U, right? If I'm kind of supporting someone one-on-one and I'm working with them, I'm always aware of, are we doing something for that person in this moment that's too easy or too challenging? And we want to be right in the middle. And that is where you hear those cliches of like, growth only comes outside of your comfort zone. Posters, post-it notes in your case, can serve a really valuable purpose. But that was part of why I started doing the work that I'm doing, is because I would see these posters all over schools. I would see teachers teach explicit lessons on growth mindset. I would see them try to get people, whether it's adults or kids, and anywhere in between, reading books on the topic. And the evidence of being able to do those things weren't there. And I think two of the things that are missing when we try and just teach these things through posters or books or videos is the context, for one, as well as the ability to role model those things. And so it's been and continues to be and will be a lifelong venture of mine to model what that actually looks like. And I have a fun story about this that I like to tell. And it was in trying to think of who the documentary was. It was in the show The History of Rap. And in one of the episodes, it's on the rapper Logic. And the whole series is 4 seasons, I think. There's lots of quality episodes, but in this one in particular, it was just this like 20-second clip maybe behind the scenes of Logic speaking with his keyboard player and pianist and having them teach him how to play keyboard. And so this is someone who's a really prolific writer. He's really good lyricist, but he doesn't play the piano. And in that 20 seconds that he's playing the piano and he's learning from these people, he looks like a child again. He's so excited, he's engaged. And of all 4 of those seasons, every single episode, whatever there is, 4 seasons times 10 episodes, that was one moment where I saw someone really, really, really modeling that true essence of growth mindset.
What occurs to me when you're describing that story is I think you said that there was a context or contact for this individual. And that makes sense because when you are, say, you have a note, an inspirational quote, but it's outside of you and experienced by someone else, what you're sharing is that you are integrating that information or lesson in context with contact. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, and that's why life coaching, business coaching, fitness coaching, any type of coaching will never be less successful than a course. Of course, if you have bad coaching and you have a really high quality course, yeah, course is going to be more worthwhile. But given equal situations, like kind of a scientific test, coaching is always going to win because of the ability to have a lot of context and to really support people in the moment based on your experience, but more importantly, based on what they're going through. And that can be very, very like hyper micro, as in like what they're going through Monday morning at 8 a.m. when you meet with them. It could be a little more macro, like what they're going through in this season of becoming a piano player or whatever. But it's so specific, it's tailored to the individual. And in my earlier entrepreneurial ventures, if I was just chasing money, I never would have left. I was a personal trainer, and I was a really successful one, working 50 hours a week with clients who paid no less than $5,000 to sign up on day one. They had to pay up front, stuff like that. And I enjoyed it. There's reasons why I left, but a lot of people, it was rare, but if somebody didn't sign up to work with me, they would say something like, can you write me a program? Like, how much would that cost? And I would always say, I'll do it for free. Like, I don't care. The challenge is, and it's not just a sales tactic because I was so busy anyways, but the legitimate challenge is in 2 months from now, or 2 weeks from now, or 2 years from now, whenever you need someone in that moment that really moves the needle for you, if you can afford to do this, then that's going to have an exponential return. And so that's what I mean when I say that my challenge in my life's work has become, how do we make things a little more contextual, and maybe it's going on live and allowing 20 people to join you and answering some questions for them when they're struggling with how to book podcast guests or something, like doing workshops. I'm not exactly sure what that part of things looks like for me because it is tough. What I know is that I don't want to have it be just happenstance where if I get an inbound call from a local high school to go speak with their grade 11 business class about starting a podcast, that's neat. But there are so many people at so many different ages around the entire world that have these problems, that want to learn a skill, but don't know how to take the next steps, as I said off the top, in a mentally healthy way. And so figuring out how to make that contextualized to them is what I was referring to.
Oh, okay, I get it. And I do think that many of us often, another aspect of what you just said triggers some thoughts about when one is trying to learn something and they may not know. You don't know what you don't know, and you may not know that learning in that context will help. So if you try, like I have sometimes, open up a book or try to just get inspired by a quote, what's frustrating is that if it doesn't click, at least for myself, I feel like there's something limited in me. Like, what am I doing wrong? Or am I not as clever as those other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like filling knowledge gaps for sure, that, oh, maybe I didn't know how to, um, you know, uh, write an email newsletter course. And now I see that everybody else is doing it and it's a really cool thing. So had I known that, it would have been helpful. So there's the ability to fill knowledge gaps. Or if you are a piano teacher, you can witness someone, and I know nothing about piano yet, but I will when I learn it. But maybe they notice something in the way that their hands move that they can cue them on. There's so many things. There are a few areas where I guess I could consider myself an expert. One would be playing the sport of football. One would be fitness, teaching and learning, and then parenting, and podcasting and writing. Probably with those 6 or 7 things, I could coach somebody very contextual, very in a very supportive way where, maybe in a month we had a plan to release a solo podcast episode every day for 5 days or something as a little test. And they missed day 2 and day 4. And we hop on a call in a very supportive way. I can say, what happened with missing those 2 days? Because this was part of our atomic habit. This was part of the plan. And then who friggin' knows, right? The answer could be related to mindset. It could be related to focus and productivity. It could just be related to the speed at which they were editing. It could be related to so many things. Maybe they got everything done and then they got stuck thinking about a thumbnail for 6 hours. So that's a little bit of mindset. It's also a little bit of efficiency. We hop on that call and you're able to kind of solve that problem for them in a very, very specific way. To use another one of the examples, like parenting, someone's kid's always telling them to F off every time they try and get them ready for school in the morning. It's kind of like being a coach in a sports situation where you kind of need to break down the film, so to speak, and be like, okay, well, what happened 10 minutes before that? When did they wake up? What did they eat for breakfast? There's so many questions. And without those questions, we can't really help as much as we could. So if I created a course on podcasting, it could be how to edit. It's going to have to be specific headlines or subtopics. And to your point, maybe those don't even help because you kind of know all that knowledge already. It's breaking down what's missing right now that keeps me making progress in the best way that I can. And I think that's why something like a great coach of even a sports team can have outsized exponential returns in, like, let's say, a volleyball tournament or even a golf coach or something like that, because they know how to work with that person in a way that's so specific to what gives them their Pareto's principle of like the 80% that matters most, the 20% of things that you do that matters the most. How do you get that person doing that for whatever skill they want to learn?
And how did you, and I sort of asked this earlier, but what I'm really inspired by and would love to hear is that niche and that understanding and having that, I would say, maturity, know the context is inherently important, and integrating that knowledge when you are trying to help others. You must have arrived into that understanding somehow, but what inspired you to take that path originally to even start what you're doing, but even the early catalyst around it? Hopefully this question makes sense.
Well, if it's around supporting people with growth mindset and learning in general, that comes both from, to keep it simple, I guess, like the traditional educational school track, as well as the track of sports and fitness. And when I was younger, in the 8th grade, I was always teaching kindergarten sports. When I was in the 12th grade, I was always teaching 8th grade sports. Then when I was in university, I was teaching high school sports. And when I became a teacher in the traditional sense of working in schools, I always coached as many sports as I can. I also played football at a pretty elite level, almost played professionally. And a lot of what you do in that whole world is based on feedback. When it comes to feedback, in the non-sports world, I find that in the world of art and creativity, myself included, we tend to be a little more sensitive. And even just from straight data, we tend to have more sensitive people who are in that world. But more so than whether people are sensitive or not, I think we just don't have the culture of effective, efficient feedback loops. And I'll tell another quick story that I love showing examples of. PK Subban was a player for the Montreal Canadiens hockey club. When he was on that team, there's a really good video of when they started doing like the ESPN behind the scenes of what it's like to be a professional athlete, where he comes off the ice after the first period. He sits down. He's still got all his gear on. He's sweating. They have about maybe 2 minutes, 90 seconds or something. There's like 7 coaches there. Each one of them like says things pretty aggressively, but they're giving him very direct, specific feedback by stopping plays that he's done wrong and confirming that he gets it and what he would do differently. And then he's like, yep, 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 goes around the room, gets all this feedback. And they're like, you're good? He's like, yep. He stands up and he goes back to play again. And he's going to, the coolest part of it is he's going to go implement all those changes right now. And I can promise, because I've been through many film sessions as an athlete, not one time did the coaches feel like they were being mean, but most importantly, did the athlete feel like they were being singled out or criticized, or that there was anything personal about that relationship. It was based on all of us working together to be as good as we can possibly be. And to bring it full circle to the educational school track, John Hattie wrote a really good book. It's a bit boring because it's from traditional academia, but the essence of it is all about the fact that the only real factor that makes a difference in schools is effective feedback. But we still don't really see that in schools, because putting an A- or a 70 out of 100 or writing good job, it's not even feedback. Like, I don't know what that is. It's something else. So that's kind of my background that led me to understand how important and valuable feedback is. And that's why when I've on my podcast interviewed like life coaches, for example, I completely get where they're coming from. The funny thing is society doesn't see a lot of value in that highly contextual life coaching approach. There's like a big gap between what we see as normal, because going to school and getting a star and a A+ or a D, we see as societally normal. But a life coach who's helping you with your relationships and, maybe some of your nutrition and your daily routine and your goal setting and all of these comprehensive things, probably provides feedback and helps you achieve things in life way more effectively than traditional school.
I agree. When I take approach for engaging with a client, the first thing I do is ask a lot of questions and listen a lot, because I want to understand the day in their life, their personal challenges, their personal goals, and really get a holistic impression, so that when you are engaging and trying to help them from one project to another, that you factor in that stuff. You can't say, well, why are you challenged? Well, just the other day I was working with someone and she had a car accident. So that's why there was a ripple effect on some other areas of her life. So yeah, I agree with that. And what occurs to me is that all of this requires for you to be very present with that individual or the context.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I'm reflecting a bit and realizing that I've probably worked with thousands of athletes and certainly hundreds of clients, and helping them learn is basically, if I put it into one massive topic, that's what it would be throughout my whole life. And it's not just cliche to say that there's never been 2 people that are the same. And I've never coached or taught 2 people the same in the thousands of people that I've ever worked with. I like to say that our answers to helping people solve their problems always scales down to the DNA. In other words, there is always a great answer. That's not to knock the industry of maybe doing courses and stuff like that. I take a lot of courses online because I know the reason for them. It's more filling kind of the knowledge gap. Like, oh, this would help me close this gap to learn this skill or this subset of skills that I need to learn. In terms of being present and the mindfulness aspect of it, I feel like that in a perfect world would be the case for all of us in all of our relationships, coaching or otherwise. And that's something that as a podcast host as well, I feel is very foundational. When we first start out, of course, a lot of us probably jot down questions or topics. It makes sense. And then we probably swing a little bit too far where we feel comfortable not jotting down anything in terms of like how we want to guide a conversation. And I think there's a happy medium. It seems like you're doing a great job with your show where we start to be able to be fully present, mindful. There's zero distractions. But again, that conversation can now be very contextual as well because it's not prescripted and it's not too random that we don't have some flow to it.
And it's never really random. When I've talked to different guests, I take moments before just to make sure I understand where they're coming from, what they're doing. But then the storytelling aspect, knowing where you came from, what inspired you, really helps me understand why you're doing what you're doing. And in this case, I'm just really excited to know that you have this perspective that I've often felt like I can take a course. There's so many courses. I've been meaning to write so many courses. They're all in my head. But each time I put it on paper, I have found myself often thinking, wouldn't it be better if I could just engage with the individual and share more information? Which is because I've heard people, like I teach meditation. I'll hear people going, well, I have a monkey mind. I can't do it. Well, in that case, I can't just prescribe and say, well, here are the things you need to do, because maybe their monkey mind was created for a reason, if that makes any sense.
It does. And I feel like as creators or online business owners, people trying to achieve these goals that are tied to monetization because they have to be, it's figuring out what works best for you, but also what works best for your audience, which is kind of one and the same, but important to mention kind of separately that if we're truly serving, then maybe sometimes the course does work for one person, maybe it's like a very individualized coaching thing, and sometimes a podcast, which is why we create podcasts. And I really appreciate you bringing up the why. You know, Simon Sinek's kind of classic concept of the power of why is pretty important to me. I haven't had to think of it in like 20 years because for me, it's been intact. It always has been. But a very specific short story about it is that the why of figuring out creatorship, solopreneurship, creator business type stuff is because of the students that I've worked with. And it's very easy to motivate because I've seen so many of them die by overdose or suicide or, you know, fall into human trafficking rings or struggle with homelessness, and in good scenarios, you know, work in jobs that they hate. And I have two brothers who passed away in their 30s as well. And I often wonder, because everything is connected in terms of our emotions and our physical health, if they were pursuing things that they truly intrinsically wanted to do, would that have served them better? And then the third part of that triangle in terms of my why and motivation for me is that I too struggle when I'm not being truly 100% creative. And so that could be coaching someone one-on-one, because that can be entirely creative. It could be making a film, creating a podcast, or writing a post. If it's not one of those four things, then there's a lot of intrinsic tension for me. So it's very easy to motivate the goal of all of this stuff. That's for sure.
Oh, that's a great insight. Just yesterday, as I was picking up my son from school, I was trying to pause. I was trying to be a little more present because I need to practice what I preach. And as I was walking towards his classroom, I realized, you know what? I was really enjoying that thing I was just doing at home before I left. I have to remember that because I get so caught up in the check marks and boxes, what needs to get done. And in that case, I realized, well, I was doing something very creative at the moment I had to get up from my desk. So I there must be some truth to that, for me at least, because I love being creative.
Yeah, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow, I truly believe exists for every single one of us. You know, a lot of people argue, is everyone creative? Are they not? I'm sure there's some sort of continuum upon which creativity lands for each of us. But when Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about flow, I do think that exists for all of us, whether it's dancing, painting, podcasting, or writing, or anything else. That intrinsic ability to completely have time fly by because you're loving what you're doing does exist. And maybe that's what people refer to when they talk about chase your bliss or pursue your passions. The question becomes, how do you leverage the ability to do more and more and more and more of that over time? Because for the majority of us, we don't just have unlimited financial resources to go paint all the time. And so friends of mine are really traditionally defined as struggling artists, I guess. I don't know that that's necessarily the best route to take either. There's always this happy medium. And the fun thing is, and I did share this with my brothers before they passed, was I see it as two continuums where if there were two blank kind of like bar graphs, and your kind of how you pay for your life and your lifestyle and your living expenses is one bar, maybe it's 100% not intrinsically motivated. And then the other one is at 0%. Well, we can always start to inch it up little percents at a time as the other one goes down. And over maybe 6 months, maybe 6 years or 16 years, you can get to the point where you are pursuing the thing that is a lot more connected intrinsically to flow for you. And that is my hope, that whatever that is for you, that you continue to inch towards that.
Hey, sweet souls, I love hearing from you. Fan mail is turned on. Check the show notes and send me a message. I agree. This alone could become another podcast for you and I in the future, because I was in corporate for 20 plus years, and I believe that I'm still not necessarily like a successful solopreneur. It's a long journey. It's like before I hit record, we talked about there's a lot to do, a lot to learn, and it's a discipline, that business part that I'm still learning. But the joy I get from what I do with the podcasting, the blogging, the one-on-one coaching, there's no way to measure that joy.
That makes me happy, because I would love to hear that, 4 billion times over again. And that's kind of my mission. I think I've written on blog posts or on my whiteboard, the idea of helping 1 million people. It's just a random number that a lot of us use in the business world, maybe. But the true answer is as many people as possible. I want to be able to say those same exact things. And I feel like where my current struggle in this journey is that I help a lot of people with podcasting. I help a lot of people with writing. I do a bit of freelance work kind of in both of those areas, especially writing. But I know that long term, at the heart of this is the topic of business itself. And it seems cliche almost to go down that path of being a business specific creator. But the tricky thing is it's so valuable to people, whether you want to get into audio creating or video creating or writing. So the way that I've kind of been thinking of things is almost like a pentagon or maybe a square, where the creative topics are around the outside and business is at the heart of them, and trying to figure out, like I said before, maybe some workshops or something that really helps people figure out their creative piece. But that's going to be easy. If that's interesting to you, you're going to learn how to draw. I can help, but you're going to learn how to draw. Figuring out the business piece and how do you turn this into something that allows you to, as we talked about, ratchet it up and up and up, where it becomes more and more of how you can spend your time, I think is super worthwhile. Just figuring out how to help people with that the best it's a tricky thing. It's probably a lifelong goal.
And that's where I'm at. I learn as I go. I'm laughing because I feel like I know what I enjoy, like we've talked about the podcast and other things, the coaching, but how do I do it consistently as a service, and I can continue getting joy out of it while sustaining my family.
This is the golden question.
It is the golden question. Well, Justin, I look forward to maybe having you back again because I really sincerely enjoyed our conversation. It was a necessary one, I feel, and I felt like I got a lot of value out of it. So hopefully those who listen to us will get the value.
Yeah, I love going on podcasts as much as I can, really. I am someone who I feel like does a pretty good job of productivity and focus and all that kind of stuff. And so if I were helping somebody else with that, budgeting time in terms of our 168 hours we all have is super important. One of the things that I really do try and keep space for is doing podcasts like this, because having conversations on the other side of the mic can be super helpful. And being able to do second episodes are extremely powerful. One of the things I'm most excited for with my own podcast right now is getting to a time where it makes sense to bring everybody on for the second time, because you're going to have a lot more questions from your audience. You're going to be able to frame things in a different way the second time around. And sometimes, especially recently, we've joked kind of offline about like, oh, we can make this a regular series, right? So Cody's going to be on every Thursday, or April Lynn's going to be on every month talking about YouTube. Like it starts to get almost like a news station would have, where the same guests come on to talk because the audience appreciates it. And so you let me know next year if something comes up where it makes sense for me to come on again, and I'd certainly be happy to do so, because this definitely has been fun.
Well, interesting you should say that, because this, before I hit record, remember I was saying I have the 2024 layout for my strategy, and it was very strategic. And one of the strategies around it was, how do I still continue doing this without burnout? Because I was at times hitting that burnout. I designed into next year's calendar reoccurring guests that I had from last year that I really clicked with. And I have already 2 of them on rotation. So maybe you can be on rotation for this year, because I really enjoyed this conversation, the banter, and especially this concept that you brought up about workshop and in context, connecting with people so that you are being of service and you're learning from them as well. I think that's I mean, it's not a new concept, but it's relevant.
No, it's not new, and it's the what is newer maybe is we are still young enough in the world of like online education, free or paid, that we're solving a lot of the problems, and it is an existing problem for how do you scale context and individualization. For example, let's say your audience wants to also start a podcast and you're really interested in doing an episode where you're talking about that. If I came on the show for us to talk about podcasting, it would be good. I'm sure you could collect questions from them and stuff like that, but they might have a question while they're driving and listening. They can't really ask it unless we're doing like a live stream and people are raising their hand like you do in Clubhouse or on Twitter Spaces or something, where they can ask in the moment a question. I don't do that for my show. I don't even like to. I find it distracting. But figuring out how to do more of that is probably worthwhile for all of our audiences, right? Because then it gets more and more and more contextual. But in terms of the repeat guest part, yeah, absolutely. Just let me know.
Yeah, and just those who are listening, on my website, I have leave a voicemail, which is essentially created for this very reason. I think I might change it so it'll say something like, ask us anything. But the point of creating that was so that once you hear that guest, you're like, oh, I'd like to learn more. Leave a voicemail, and I will make sure that the guest gets it and it can be part of a future episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting. And now my thinking brain is being turned, my social media marketing, just audience support, customer service brain is spinning, because I think questions at any point help too, right? But that creates a lot of work for you if these are questions for other guests from the past and stuff. That all that to say, though, yeah, being specific enough to say, like, if you have clarity about what it's for. So if it's for future guests that are coming on the show, um, or topics that you want to be discussed on the show before you go get future guests, yeah, just being explicit enough to say, ask us a question that we could answer on the show with future guests. Yeah, I think that could, and maybe it is already being really helpful for you.
Yeah, actually, I'll figure out how to include that when we release your podcast or before it, so that people can ask questions. There's logistics I probably have to figure out, but Justin, I can't wait to have you back. I really enjoyed our conversation. It brought value to my life, and I know it hopefully will with people who are sincerely tuning in.
Well, thank you so much. It's like I said, my life's work, it very much is. So I'm just excited to do it as much as possible, really, because with gratitude and perspective, we never know when that will truly be. So every time I get an opportunity to share like this, I'm always appreciative. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I hope you have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for tuning in, sweet soul. If you've enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful for your kind review on Apple Podcast. Simply click on the link in the show notes to leave your lovely feedback and uplift our spirits. Your support means the world to me and helps our show thrive. So please show me your love and continue to practice Omni Mindfulness.